Welcome to the Wheel of Bliss podcast. The goal of this season is to go deeper into Jason's understanding by applying my models so that we are able to spend next season covering Jason's model for everything. The format is for Jason to share the Buddhist perspective and then for me to connect it to what happens with the mind and the brain so that we can see how and why Jason alone was able to come up with the model for everything. So today's topic is a topic I've just been dying to talk about since season one. It's impermanence. And Jason, could you explain to everybody the Buddhist doctrine of impermanence?
Thank you so much, John. And thanks for the opportunity to express this fascinating concept. It's just, they say when you understand these concepts in Buddhism, it's like, at first they're kind of scary when you hear impermanence or nothingness or emptiness. But once you understand them, they become completely blissful. Just thinking about them brings upon great bliss. So so you hear about this term impermanence a lot, and other translations are like transitory, the transitory or the momentary. And I've heard it described that this is the most important discovery the Buddha made. And it's the most important concept in our immediate experience. And yet you could not notice it and live your life without it or with this knowledge. Same person, but having a different understanding of this concept, which is always operating constantly. And it's funny because you know how nowadays everybody's an expert in politics, right? Like everybody just jumps on Twitter, jumps on Facebook, and they just act like they know so much about what's going on in thousands of miles away. What's going on in the body without the basic understanding of biology. Everybody's an expert in these things that are so vast and have so many factors. And yet, impermanence is something that every single person has access to understanding. It's the one thing everybody can understand. You know what I mean? Like even in a family, it's impossible to truly understand what happened. One kid says this, the other kid says this, who's lying? But impermanence, it's smack in your face every single moment. Literally, that's like the whole meaning of it, is the momentary, right? So the Buddha described there's two types of phenomena. There's the internal phenomena, also called mental phenomena. So again, you have a mind, which is the experience, like you are aware of this moment, and now it's the next moment, but there is a part of you that is aware each moment. And in that moment, there is feelings, there's perceptions, there's thoughts. Your mind is being moved to different objects, different mental objects, but there's this movement in the mind. We call that internal phenomena. And then there's the external phenomena, which is, again, you're looking at a tree and it looks like the same tree every single day. Trees can live 200 years, but if you think about it, one day to the next, there were ants crawling in the tree. There were new leaves coming or going. So, but if you really think about it, the tree is changing every single moment. And we talked in the last season briefly about what is a moment, 360 moments in the snap of a finger. So, but a moment is a tiny amount of time. And we can get into next season, is there actually like an actual moment, or is it empty? But we won't even go there. That's even deeper. Right now, just impermanence is that there is a succession of moments. So when you're looking at a tree, again, we have been unconsciously habituated to projecting onto objects externally, like a tree, that this is a tree. And even with a person, our wife, our husband, we give them a name. And when you give something a name, it also has a sense of permanence. That's why the first thing you got to understand is is the naming process, because that naming helps. Naming works with the projection process of making things permanent that aren't. So yeah. So your wife, she's changing every single moment. So there is a very practical, psychologically, a way to optimize your everything about your life through this understanding of impermanence. Because again, when you're seeing things as permanent, they don't change. When you say things like "you're always like this," you see these like people have been married 50 years, they're still like complaining about the same things. So every single moment, just the physical body. In Buddhism, we say there's 5 aggregates. It's funny because we don't even think of these 5 parts as parts. Each one of them are impermanent. Each one of the 5 aggregates that make up a person, and the person also is impermanent. So it's like 5 impermanent things that come together to create the person, but all of them are impermanent and empty. But but the point is that the physical part of us, like I'm breathing in air, I'm converting things and expelling things and taking in new matter from the outside. Every single cell, like reproduce, asymmetrically reproducing. And so, and then the other aggregates are feelings. Every single moment is changing. So it's all that. So then if you think about it though, what's kind of, I'll give a little clue here, is that you have this external and internal changes, but what no physicist can explain is what is causing this moment to arise and then cease, and another moment to take its place. So there is this thing, and again, the Buddha is not going to tell you. Buddha is never about like, here's the answer, I can explain it with this cause. No, he's just saying, look at the impermanence, and just acknowledge it's there. What's causing it? You'll get there, but you're not going to get there until you can see that this is a reality in this world. Maybe we're in a matrix. That's kind of what this impermanence starts to beg the question. It starts to make you wonder, And again, that's when people get real aggravated, and you're helping me with, debating and arguing more effectively, because I'm just like, just destroy the argument. But there's a graceful way to do it. But what was I going to say? People, what all of the debating is all about, what Buddhism is all about. The goal is to make your mind flexible, to just be able to entertain other ideas. When someone tells me a crazy idea, I'm like, I'm listening, because I just want to hear how it's put together. If there's internal contradiction, I know it's garbage right away. But if there's internal, cohesiveness, doesn't mean it's true. But at least there's a thought out argument that I can do some research on now. So anyway, yeah. So, but what I'm saying is that we don't know. Well, our physics can't explain what's causing it. I've heard physicists say we don't know why time only moves in one direction. And the Buddha completely destroys time with this idea of impermanence. Like, according to Buddha, you cannot time travel. You cannot travel back, even though the Buddha could see the future because he understood cause and effect to such a fine detail, but you can't get into a time machine and travel back in time. That's the whole meaning of impermanence. And that's why, like, I would love to see like a physicist, Buddhist, like, debate this idea of time space, Einstein's time space, because that's where all this like time travel stuff came from. In Buddhism, there is no past. Like, it's impermanent. It arose, it's over. However, there is karma. There are things that cause it to unfold a certain way, arise a certain way. So it doesn't mean that we don't have control. We actually have far more power and free will when you understand like what the Buddha is teaching. People think Buddhism is nihilistic and, you just do nothing. And that's far from the truth. Although there is a phase of the training when you are meant to kind of like cut ties and really look at impermanence and suffering for a period of time. But when you get to the advanced teachings, it is not about it's not about just denying everything. So the Buddha, he figured this out, and that's why he is a Buddha, because this is the gateway to really understanding reality. So there's many stages to this, but impermanence is the first step. So, like I said, we have these unconscious projections of permanence about ourself. If we and you hear it all the time, like, I am who I am, I can't change. Like, I love changing, but that means admitting you're wrong, right? So our ideas, our culture, people think the culture is going to stay the same way, and then when it changes, they're like this, they're disappointed. There's trends, even the stock market, like investments. If you understand impermanence, you'll do better at investing. So you become overall more intellectually agile by understanding impermanence. because it helps us understand cause and effect better and better, because that's what it is. It's like there's this, if you see things as just like, I'm in this big fish tank called the world, right? I'm just walking around in this world, and you don't see impermanence. You're just kind of like a pinball, like bouncing off things. But when you understand every moment is a fresh moment, like your mind is resetting every moment. Reality is resetting every moment. It's in video game terms, rendering every single moment. So and like, let's say we want to get healthy. Like, I'm going to get healthy. If you understand more and more impermanence, that your body doesn't come out of nothing. It's built up by what you eat and how you treat it. So this cause-effect relationship between food, the act of eating, and how your body is going to be. Like, you want your body to be a certain way. Like, why do you want to be healthy? To avoid disease, to feel better, to be able to be more functional, right? So impermanence is really, again, the gateway to all of this. And here's a funny thing. What is permanent? Is anything permanent? We say all phenomena is impermanent. There's a few exceptions. So one of them is space. So the Buddhist concept of space is not like outer space, and it's definitely not space-time. Space just means non-obstruction, that which doesn't obstruct. So I could put my hand here because there's nothing obstructing it. So space is a permanent phenomena, but it doesn't exist. Now, impermanence, though, is actually a permanent phenomena. Impermanence is a permanent phenomena. Why is that? Because what is a permanent phenomena? A permanent phenomena is something that is not an object of the senses. Because everything that we're experiencing, internal, all the 5 parts of our being, and all the things in our mind, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and everything external that's changing moment by moment is impermanent. It's a functional thing. And this technical meaning of function in this case is it ceases and gives rise to the next moment. It's a cause. Everything is a cause and effect in the impermanent world. They're called products. They're called functional things. These are all synonyms. Now, a permanent thing can exist, but it's an object of a conceptual mind. So what it means is I can never see impermanence. I can see the things changing over time, but that's just seeing, the red pot slowly breaking over time, or the mount, if you lived long enough, you'd see the mountains changing over time. But impermanence is a conceptual idea, but it exists. So this is where it gets so interesting, because you could almost say, like, Buddhist practice is learning to take a concept like impermanence and study it, contemplate it until you can see it. And that is, you can see it. This is like where the epistemology really comes in, is that you can have these, what we call realization. That's a good way to translate it. Breakthrough experiences. but it doesn't come out of nowhere. That's what the whole thing is. Like, you could have breakthrough experiences, but in Buddhism, Buddhist teaching, it's like start with impermanence. And there's definitions. Yeah. So if someone tells me they're into Buddhism, I'm listening to how they talk to see if they understand impermanence or not. Because I don't care if you spend 40 years saying you're a Buddhist. If you don't understand impermanence, you haven't gotten anywhere. Like, it's good.
Right.
You've done some good deeds. You planted some good seeds. So like I said, I'll wrap it up with, the whole Buddhist teaching, right? The real thing, it's an investigation into the ontological foundation of reality, meaning what really exists. Because you could say, who cares? I still have to pay my bills. But from a philosophical point of view, it's the most important thing. Who am I? Where did I come from, and where am I going? And again, not everybody is a philosopher in this life, but like I said, there's a long journey. There's stages of understanding emptiness. You can't skip them because you have to have this aha moment in order to get to the next step. So everything, though, starts with impermanence. Like, this is the first step. This is the first step. You want to become a wise person, a wizard. Like, a wizard just means like a drunkard, just means a person with wisdom. If you want to have true wisdom, start understanding impermanence. So this is the first step to getting out of the matrix.
Right. So I love how you said that there is that what we're really talking about is what is the nature of reality? What is real? How do you know what is real? Mm-hmm. And it really should begin there. So I get it. Impermanence is like the first thing, because whatever you're talking about, the first question you can always ask is, well, is that real? So this is absolutely the foundation.
Yeah, no, that was it. I think I talked a lot. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
So the way I put this together, and from the first place I go is something you said in season 1 when you talked about meditating and being able to see the frames. I thought that was such a great analogy, and I learned that analogy live from you. It was recorded. I didn't have the analogy, and almost immediately I said, I'm gonna use this. So let's start with that, because when we talk about the brain, when we see a movie, we think permanent. The permanent thought is that I am watching something actually happen. I am watching a continuous event. But the reality is that as long as you see more than 24 pictures in a second, your brain can't distinguish between the pictures. So if I show you a series of pictures, 10 a second, 12 a second, even 20 a second, you can pick out the pictures. When I get to 24 or more, the brain goes, I can't tell the difference between the pictures. I see it all the same. So what's the permanent solution? Those are pictures. What do we think it is? That it really isn't? It's a continuous film. It's not. You are not watching a continuous event. You're watching a series, and your brain fills that in. So that's where I want to start with this, and start with your analogy. So let's all realize that our brain sees pictures and makes it seem like it's reality. So that's a sight issue. Now let's take another sense, our sense of hearing. And this happened to me decades ago. I went to the Toronto Science Museum, and they had a display there where they explained that your cell phone is off half the time. How can my cell phone be off? Well, what happened is in one booth, they showed if your cell phone was off every half a second, it sounded like this. And if your cell phone, in the other display, they had the cell phone cutting out every millisecond, and it sounded like this. So the point was even though the cell phone was off half the time, if it was off and on every millisecond, your ear cannot distinguish when it's off and on, and everything sounds fine. Now notice, when it cycles off, if it were to go to another person, you're talking to another person, and cycle back on to the first person and do that, now you have like a three-way call. Now you think you're talking to two people at the same time, but there's only one signal coming through, but the signal's going back and forth between the two, and it happens so quickly. It seems like they're both talking. They're not. The actual, it's alternating between it. So that's how your sound, your hearing can be thrown off. So I've already shown that what you're seeing and what you're hearing appears to be continuous, appears to be real. It's not, it's moments. So you talked in season 1 about things don't exist, they arise. And it was this concept, Jason, that this moment arises and then it goes away and then it arises and then it goes away. And when I was getting my engineering degree and we're taking calculus, they always talk about somebody shooting an arrow. And what's the path of the arrow? It's like this. Well, where's the arrow at a certain time? It's here. Where is it a second earlier? It's here. Where is it a half second in between? It's here. And at some point, how did the arrow get from here to here? There's infinite, you could splice that infinite ways. And so the thing I love about calculus is it's not really completely math. It's half philosophy. But even in the math, they had this concept that this arrow isn't continuous. It's here. And then at time, it's here at time whatever, and then here at time whatever, and here. And you actually visualize the arrow as arising. Everything you said. So when you first taught me the arising, I'm like, wait a minute. I learned this in calculus. We don't see the arrow as doing this. We see the arrows here, then here, then here, then here, and we do across the path. So am I getting that arising right? Can you explain a little more about this arising?
So you're saying that calculus is basically approximating everything. It's like it's trying to break it down so small that you still know where the arrow is going to land, although there's like a little flaw in it that it can't actually calculate everything. It's like not precise.
So this is my best way to explain calculus to everybody who doesn't know calculus, is that this arrow travels a path, and what we do is we say we need to find this like area under a curve in a sense. So what we do is we say the arrow is here, and that's this distance, and the slice is not filled the arc completely. Mm-hmm. So if you slice that in half, you get a little closer to filling out the arc.
Right.
Well, if you slice that in half,
right.
So what happens is uh-huh. You say, how thick is the slice?
Right.
So the slice is X thick.
Mm-hmm.
So if X equals a half, the slice is a bunch of halves. Well, there's still this area. Well, if the slice X would go to 0, but would approach 0, right. but never make it to 0.
Right.
So that's the whole thing with calculus. It's like, well, how thin is this X slice going to get? Well, it's going to approach 0. It's right. never going to reach 0. But if it can get super close to 0 without being 0, because if it reaches 0, we can't calculate anything. But if it got super close to 0, we get it exact. And that's what calculus is we're going to slice this thing infinitely small slices, or what is it, 360 slices a snap of a finger, right? Like that's what we're doing in calculus, right. And then we can get an accurate measure. So really in calculus,
it's a clue. This is great though, because it's like another clue of impermanence and emptiness. Because it's the same thing with particles. You get to you find the smallest particle, it's still going to have a top and a bottom, a front and a back. So it's a clue that it's not. It's like you're approaching the whole thing. You're missing something big.
And that's what I was going to talk about next. I was going to talk about particles. So I have a degree in chemical engineering and chemistry. My first semester, freshman year, I took a class in spectroscopy. It was actually a sophomore chem major class. I was taking it as an incoming freshman. There was a lab and a classroom, a lecture. I was overloading. And the first thing we learned was quantum theory. And so here's my explanation of quantum theory to anybody who just wants the cheap overview of this, is that everything is made up of atoms. And 99.99% of the space inside of an atom is nothing. So the space between the atoms is nothing. And 99.9% of an atom is nothing. So really, first of all, 99.99% of everything, actually a lot more than that, is nothing, to your point about impermanence. Now, what is the atom made of? The atom has a nucleus of protons and neutrons, where all the weight is, and they have electrons. Well, to your point, you can take those things, those particles, apart, and they have smaller parts. And you can take them apart. And at some point, when you take one, like if you get down to the smallest thing and you take it apart, it's nothing. I mean, you have nothing. You don't have parts sitting around. All of a sudden, the whole of what you have is nothing, and it's all nothing. So what is everything made up of? Everything is actually made up of energy. And energy is just vibrations. So really, everything that you see is energy. We think it's solid, it's mass. It's not. Everything is energy, and everything is vibration, which is really nothing. Like there's nothing permanent or nothing solid in everything you see. So go ahead.
I'm going to just give a little preview of the season 3 when I talk about my model, because I have an answer to what that energy is and where it's coming from. And everybody's missing it because they're all like, energy can't be created and destroyed. They're still putting it into this container, but it's actually arising from a deeper level of reality.
Right.
7. I call it the 7.
Right.
So the energy.
I don't want you to give too much away.
I'm just saying that, like, that the illusion is that things are arising from themselves.
Right.
But they're not.
They're not. And I'm going to get that in a second, but you're right. So the thing is if you know anything about physics and you know anything about energy, and you know anything about vibrations, a vibration is kind of off and on, off and on.
Mm-hmm.
So really, everything you see, because when you hit something, it's really the charge that's holding you back from it. And I've said this to people. If you go to an upper level physics class, I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, the professor will give one lecture where while he's talking, he's throwing a rubber ball against the wall. And he'll give the lecture, and you sit there and go, why are you throwing a rubber ball against the wall? And he will explain that what's happening is everything is made up of these particles that are really energy, that are really vibrating, and they're vibrating off and on. And there is a moment where this thing would be off and that ball would go through the wall. And he doesn't want to miss that moment. And so that's what these, like, it's going to be, and they'll do that because it keeps it. I mean, it's kept it in my brain for 40 years. It's been 40 years since I've been to a physics class. But that's what happens, and I've hear other physics professors talk about it. I even see some high school physics professors do this. But that's how they try to illustrate it. That wall that you see is vibrating off and on. It's there, and then it's not. It's there, and it's not, which lends itself to this arising. So everything you see is vibrating off and on so fantastically quick, it looks like it's always on. So if something
it's not
a
just
millisecond,
an off and on, though, because when it's an on, it's not the same as what it was previously.
I know. So that's what I want to say is, so if you think
on,
about it,
and then it's off, and then when it arises again, it's basically received all the information of everything else in existence, and then it comes back in the same place.
It comes on, it's the arrow. The arrow's on, and then it's off, and then it's on, and then it's off, and it's on.
when you look at the wall's made up of parts, and all those parts are doing the same thing.
Right.
And
Right.
those parts
Right.
below it are doing the same thing.
Right. So you're right. So when it comes back on, that's when the change occurs.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I've heard you teach, you've taught me, and I've taught other people, is people are like, how do miracles happen?
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, when you understand that things are on and then off and back on, if whatever is behind all this has it come on differently that time,
right? It's like, how do
all
you,
of a sudden,
and this explains how, the Buddhists talk about it too. There's walking on water, walking through walls. These are common occurrences, but it all starts, like, all those powers start with understanding impermanence, because how do you, basically, it's like we think we just control our bodies, but like, how do you control the arising? How do you control?
you get so far ahead of me. You're getting so far ahead of me. So this is, I want to set this up so that I can just hear you explain this, because you got this. So back to your point about when it arises differently.
Mm-hmm.
I like to look at this, and you gave me this analogy, this video game analogy. So if you play a game, and I tend to explain this to younger people. So, and what's funny is when I explain this, people will say, are you on mushrooms, or do I need to be on mushrooms? And it's like, just bear with me here. So if you're playing a game like Minecraft, you are the real thing in a sense, and you are interacting in this matrix of the game. And that game is arising. It blatantly is arising, and it's arising differently. That's what
there's no actual world in the game. Everything is code, and when you go to this part of the game, the code, and when you leave that room, that room is gone. It's not there anywhere.
Right. So the thing is, though, is
but the code is there, that when you go back in the room, everything is how it was.
Right.
But anyway,
so when you log out of that, and then you log back in again, something, the CPU in this case, is keeping track of your inventory. It's keeping track of where you were, what stuff you gathered. It's keeping track of everything. So to your point, there's something holding up this matrix. There's something that is determining how it arises, just like in that video game.
Right.
So, and we'll talk about that more in season 3. But the point is, and you were making this point, is that, and they've found this out, is that just in the last year, is they've done studies with light. Because what's light? Light's energy. They've done studies with light, and light acts one way when there's not a person observing it, and light acts differently when a person observes it. So now it looks like our observation, our intention, our attention, whatever you word you want to use, is affecting the arising moments.
Well, I'll give a clue, though, because what they miss in that experiment, what they don't seem to understand that we understand, is that, like, they're saying, like, oh, my attention affected it. It's actually what we say is, how do things arise? Okay, this is a little advanced, but I got to drop this.
Yeah.
We say everything arises interdependently. So that means everything in existence, when it arises, it somehow is arising in relation to everything else that's arising.
And I call it systems thinking. In fact, synthesis system thinking. So I agree completely with that.
So there's Rupert Sheldrake with the morphogenic fields. There is an intelligence in the system, but we're talking about, So I'm talking like a single object has like a interdependent arising, but I'm saying everything in existence, including, because remember, in Buddhist terminology, mind does not arise from body, which when we talk about my model, I'll explain that.
And I want to talk about that next, man. You were just right ahead of me the whole way.
But also mind and body, internal and external phenomena, arise interdependently. So like all these scientific experiments that people are doing are inherently flawed. I like the idea of a double-blind placebo experiment, and there's even triple blind placebo, but it's still the fact that you're running the experiment, you're already changing it. But anyway.
Right. Right. So here's the thing is I talk about your mind or your soul being who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
It's intangible, I would say it's spiritual, and that doesn't arise. That exists and it doesn't change. I would say that's a thing that's permanent, but that's not this, that's not this.
Mm-hmm.
So we exist outside of this, and we have to call it a matrix.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're really talking about here is, do we live in a matrix? We absolutely live in a matrix. We exist as mind or souls in, and we'll talk about this in many dimensions. And what we do, though, is we interact with each other through this avatar, this
Mm-hmm.
physical, whatever physical means right now, body that
Exactly.
arises all the time. So we are interacting with each other in a matrix, but the thing that doesn't change is our mind or soul, which is outside of all of this. And so when I was young, when I was, in college or even in high school, I can remember mathematicians saying there has to be at least 10 dimensions to support our 4 dimensions. We have 3 physical dimensions and time.
Mm-hmm.
And they say there has to be at least 10. Now there's all this data saying there is 10 dimensions or even 11 dimensions. But when you take a psychedelic, what you're doing is you're basically freeing yourself from this real conscious aspect. And I believe you're able to get into these bigger dimensions. And so when you talk to people, an example I talk about is like love or peace. Like you ask people, they say, I saw peace. I saw love. Well, can you have more or less love? Can you have more or less peace? Yeah, it's a dimension. That's what that is. So we experience these dimensions. We don't see them, but in 10 or 11 dimensions, if you were to take a psychedelic, you're going to see these other dimensions. So we are not in this matrix. We act in this matrix, but we exist outside of it. And so then that's where I think when Buddha's talking about, nothing, nothing exists. Nothing in this matrix actually exists. Your body, your brain
Right.
doesn't,
And
none of it
nothing.
exists.
And again, we actually don't say doesn't exist, because we say don't inherently exist. They don't exist from their
Okay.
own side. Because if something exists from their own side, like if I say, does that broom truly exist? And you say yes, that would mean that it was always a broom. It couldn't have been made from wood, because
Okay.
inherent existence means that it exists above and beyond its characteristics. Its characteristics are all the parts of it that make it up. The wood, the quality, who made the broom, all that stuff are the causes. This is really deep stuff, but it's so
Oh
fun.
yeah, I love it. I love this stuff.
But what we say is it exists in the sense that it arises, but it doesn't inherently exist, or it doesn't truly exist,
Okay.
existing by its own power. Because if something truly existed by its own power, it couldn't change. So
I like this. This
but
is
we all
getting into
know,
another topic
yeah.
later.
Well, this is why I was saying, like, this impermanence is literally like the little brother of emptiness. Empty, like if this is already pretty deep, but the emptiness stuff goes way beyond. We have like something called like the Vajra slivers, the diamond slivers, like these arguments that are so strong they're like diamonds, like they could break apart reality. So there's like all these tests, and then there's the idea of one and many. So yeah, that's a future episode.
Go ahead, and I would love to hear it, because that's kind of my explanation right there. Is that there is this. It makes sense because we exist outside of this matrix. We
Right.
can affect this matrix. But
Mhm.
like you said, everything's intertwined.
Right.
So do you want to go ahead? And I'd love to
Well,
hear
no,
more
well, no, I mean,
about this.
again, little
About
preview of,
explain emptiness versus impermanence. I'd love
well,
to hear
I'll
that.
give a little preview of like the model in this sense, but yeah, basically, um, you have the matrix. Like if you boil your experience down to the bottom of what we can call like personal experience, there is an experiencer, and then there is the experience. Could be an
Okay.
experience of chocolate, experience of this person, experience of running 10 miles, and but all so that's the bare bones of experience. Um so yeah, like there's many layers to this reality, and yes, let's just say that what we say we're really trying to target with emptiness, the reason, the cause of like all our suffering is the belief in a true existence of a self and the true existence of phenomena.
Because you think nothing's ever going to change. So what you're experiencing right now is what you're always going to
well
experience.
well
Nothing
well
changes.
that's kind of impermanence. I'm going into emptiness. Emptiness means that um like it's even quicker. So when something arises, like everything that appears to you in your day, like when you're really like practicing this yoga, this the word yoga really means like you're just you're just like deeply contemplating something for like a day, a month until you get it. That's yoga. So um but when you're contemplating emptiness, you're practicing. As soon as something happens, as soon as the experience happens, as soon as you open your eyes, as soon as you smell the coffee, you hear the noise, all appearances, all experiences are empty. So the impermanence is like slowing them down. The emptiness is like cutting it before it even arises. But what happens, again, this is really jumping ahead, is you find out though, it sounds very terrifying. In fact, like when the Buddha taught this, it was said that people had heart attacks, like literal heart attacks. They were vomiting blood because it's very shocking. And that's why you don't reveal emptiness to people who aren't ready for it. But our listeners are good, the impermanence is the first step. But the emptiness is okay. Great story. When I asked my teacher Geshe Demchuk, when I was in India, and I was like really like hearing about emptiness all the time, I was just grasping at this understanding of stuff. And I said, "What is emptiness?" And I was like, I was in India watching TV, some Indian show, and he just points to the TV. He goes, "Emptiness is everything is like a movie." You know, so
Okay.
so it's it doesn't mean that our experience isn't happening, and it doesn't mean that nothing matters. It's in fact the exact opposite. Um,
It's that the moment matters, and so then when the moment passes, it doesn't matter
well,
because this moment
yes,
matters.
and also more important than the moment is what's causing the moment, and that's where the deeper levels of reality come from. Like
Oh yeah,
what
we're going to cover
yeah.
causality. That's my other favorite topic. So yeah, we will definitely do that. But okay, so let me see if I can explain this back to you. So what matters is the moment because you're experiencing it and the contemplation of what caused it.
Well, yeah, the understanding like that. Okay, that's what I is the first shift, is to realize that everything isn't arising. So when you say it matters, it matters in the sense it's the only thing you can actually know.
Oh,
You know what I
nice.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
are we in a matrix or are we not? It doesn't right now. We can't know that,
You can't
but
really
you
know
could
that.
know
No.
whether I'm in a matrix, or like Descartes says, maybe I'm in hell, maybe we're in heaven. We could be in all these different places, but that's all thought. The thing we know is this moment of experience. And then from that, and that's why, like, when you're doing the debate stuff is all about understanding impermanence, because, and epistemology, because it's like, it's training yourself to just realize that everything is the present moment. So what it does is, it trains you also to think of everything. That's why I say, if you really want to get into like Buddhist practice, you have to be willing to let go of everything you think you know.
Right.
Because what do you know? You know this moment of experience, and you know things that you've experienced. But like I said, when you're getting into science and if you're not a scientist yourself, or if you're reading the history books, think of how much history is written by the winners. We know that. How many winners have there been? How many books have been changed on purpose in order to corrupt history? So the point is to train you to really just like you can read books, you can have these ideas, but really, if you wanna have like a really grasp on reality and be able to have conversations with others on reality, you have to be aware that the thing you truly know is what you're experiencing this present moment. And so that's why when we do the debates, it all starts off with like, this is the color red, because we could start with something observable like the color red, like the red, the red pot. Then you can start talking about the pot being impermanent. So you don't start off with these very abstract philosophical things. You start off with, what can you know right now? Well, whether I'm in a matrix or not a matrix, I know that pot, I'm experiencing the pot as red. So if you start there, which impermanence helps you do, now you can start asking all of the deeper epistemological and ontological questions. I know it's confusing.
No,
but
so epistemological is how we know what we know,
yeah,
and
Buddhism is more
ontological is whether it's reality.
Sorry, so yeah. Say it again. Sorry.
And ontology is what is real.
Yeah,
what's the
and
nature
Buddhism
of reality?
is far more concerned with epistemology than ontology.
How we know what we know.
Okay. Whereas Western culture, it's all ontology. Like, oh, this is George Washington did this. Oh, it turns out, and like I just read that George Washington was good, he was bad, he was this. So these are all these like statements of like, this is what happened, and it's so one-sided. Whereas
it's just facts or information. Yeah.
Epistemology is like, well, where did you get that? Where did this new data come from? And like, how can we disprove it? That's the whole thing about epistemology and Buddhism and science, is you're always looking to disprove anything you're holding on to,
which is based on cause and effect, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
So eventually, but the thing is that why in the West we can't really conceive of changing, the arising, because we're just focused on the fact, versus in the East they have this idea of changing reality because they understand the why behind it and they're focused on the how.
Well, yeah. Well, they're like I call it like, Daniel Perdue in that book, that big debate book, he talks about Aristotelian versus Dharmakirti or Buddhist. Dharmakirti was the one who wrote all this epistemological works, but it's based on the Buddha's teaching. But so the Aristotle described things as things, nouns, where in a Buddhist sense of the world, there's no nouns, only verbs. Everything is a verb. Everything is like I said, ceasing and causing the next moment to arise. It's like it arises, and then it contains the seed for the next moment. But so that was a little like, what I guess what I'm trying to say is it's events. Like
that's amazing. That's amazing that they see everything as a verb.
Yeah, our whole epistemology in the West is based on Aristotle. Like, we don't realize it. The average person growing up in Argentina or even China now don't realize that this Western culture is really Aristotle. It's a world of things. So even though the East used to be much more influenced by Buddhist, now everything is most people are looking at things in terms of things.
And then they see a thing as permanent. And it's what you said in your introduction, is The minute you put a word to something as a
Yes.
noun, it implies it actually exists and it's permanent, versus if you see it as a verb and you see it as changing, then you're more open to it changing and
Yeah,
you being able to change it.
words are useful. The downside of it is it's again, everything in Buddhism is about the mind, is about the brain mind, right? So
Right.
it's like, so it's when you, it's like, this is a pot, or this, this is a lamp. Well, not if you're speaking Japanese, or if you're speaking Spanish, it's not that. Like they have a
What
different
is it in
word.
Japanese? What is it in Japanese?
Oh man, now you're let me think. Denki. Light is denki.
Okay.
So I'm just saying that, like, the
But
word.
what does that imply in
No, what I'm saying
Japanese?
is that, like, the thing that emits light. Let's just say the definition of a light is that which creates electromagnetic energy in the visible spectrum, right?
Right.
Shoots out photon. I don't know. You know better than me how it
Yeah,
works,
you got it.
but that is the definition. The name light is just a sound that English
Yeah.
speakers recognize.
Yeah, it's
So,
just some,
so,
yeah.
so what I'm saying is that, like, the most dull-minded people, because again, this is a process of getting mental agility. When you're totally free, it's like emptiness. You just see reality as it is. A Buddhist sees reality as it is every single
Right.
moment. But the dullest minded person confuses the word itself. Doesn't only speaks like one language, because even if you speak two or three languages, just by the benefit, you could be very dull minded, but that alone makes you a little bit more understanding. So I'm just trying to say, again, it's all about this action, this mental action of projecting permanence onto things. So I'm just saying that, like,
Mhm.
words and different languages are created differently. Japanese reflects more of, like, this verb like aspect, but it's still very Western still. But, like, my point is, like, ancient Chinese, they said, and like Sanskrit didn't really have nouns the way we have them. But the point is, like, in English, it's very, like, everything is nouns, which again could be useful. And, like, the great thing about philosophy and this whole type of thing is that the very weakness of the English language is what can help you expose this type of projection we're doing. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's the word, and it's more the mental process.
Yep.
But the word is like, it's like the cement. It makes it even stronger. But then you could separate that, and then, like I said, you could start to see the impermanence. That, like, for example, like, you look at a tree and you're like, I'm seeing the tree. No, you're only seeing the part of the tree that's facing you. You're not
Right.
seeing the tree. You're seeing, like, there's an arising of my own mental capacity to create visual data, and then there's this external object which is appearing external, even though we know in your brain isn't seeing you're not seeing the tree with your eyes.
Right.
The visual cortex is in the back of your head, actually. So everything that
Right.
seems outside of you is being reconstructed in the back of your brain and creating the perception of depth. It's
Yep.
really, you're looking at you're in your visual, you are looking at a matrix, but it even goes beyond that. So again, this triggers a lot of people, I've noticed. But just know, I try to always remind people, like, this is to see reality, and this is to free you, and freedom is always more blissful. It's a higher form of pleasure. Like, it seems like ignorance is bliss. I'm just, like, like a dog, like, fed, and I don't have to think about anything, but that's not
Or a
bliss.
Matrix quote, ignorance is bliss. Oh,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
he says, Cypher says that. But thank you so much, Jason. This is amazing. And again, this is a basic fundamental concept that we're going to need in season 3 to talk about your model. And you can
Right.
see why we wouldn't want to have to go through all of this. We want to just be able to reference impermanence as we go through your model.
And keep in
So
mind, thank you. No, John, this is awesome. And again, I'm presenting this material in a way that it's never been presented. So that's why everybody excuse my lack of agility. But yeah, this is. But I also want to say when you and I work together, like doing Wheel of Bliss, you don't like if you listen to this thing, if you probably haven't gotten this far, but if this makes no sense to you, if it only makes a little bit of sense to you, you could still do the Wheel of Bliss. Like you don't need
Oh
to know
yeah.
that. This is for a certain
No,
type
you
of
don't need.
person, but the point
Yeah,
is
this is
like
for your model for everything. This is for
yes, I'm just
season
saying
3.
it
Yeah.
will help. But if you're the type of person who like there are people who are not necessarily needing. You don't need to understand this because if you have a good
Right.
nature and you have a growth mindset, and you're willing to be wrong, like all the stuff you talk about, like you can improve, and then but eventually you will be able to understand this because
Oh yeah.
our understanding in Buddhism is the mind is not the brain. It's not part of the matrix. So you have the ability to develop wisdom infinitely, no matter who you
Perfect.
are. Yeah.
Perfect answer, man. That's great. So thank you so much.
Thanks,
I'm
John.
looking forward to this. Take care, man.
Absolutely.
Bye.